Live from North Nashville, Tennessee. North Nashville spans from Metro Center down to the border of Bicentennial Mall, including the neighborhoods of Bordeaux, Buena Vista, Parkwood Estates, Germantown, Haynes Manor, Jefferson Street, Fisk Park, Cumberland Gardens, Oak Valley, Enchanted Hill, and many others. It's perhaps best known for the 3 universities housed here, including Tennessee State University, Fisk University, and Meharry Medical College. North Nashville is also home to the Tennessee Titans practice facility. The Tennessee Titans will begin construction on an expansion project at St. Thomas Sports Park, which will almost double its current footprint in Nashville's Metro Center neighborhood. The plan includes 60,000 square feet in additions, including a new building situated along one of the practice fields, and major renovation of spaces within the existing 75,000 square foot building.
Now live from North Nashville, Dr. William Head. Let's talk about it.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk About It here in beautiful North Nashville, Tennessee. Today is Peter Principle Day. Whatever can, will. We've had all sorts of difficulties getting hooked up with our guest today and getting the sound right. Hopefully it's coming over to you in a manner that is pleasing to your ear. As a salute to the people of Memphis who have comported themselves in a very, very positive manner since the police murder of Tyree Nichols. They have suffered yet another blow, and Memphis has become the flashpoint for another time of great struggle. Martin Luther King in 1968, and we come back to Memphis again here in 2023. And at issue are some of the same things that were at issue at that particular time that we now find ourselves struggling with once again. I'd like to say, give kudos to the cities across the country who joined Memphis in their mourning and demonstration. Atlanta, New York, and BMO, and Charlotte, Newark, Dallas, and Raleigh all had significant demonstrations in their cities supporting Memphis and bringing attention to the problem with police, I hate to say brutality, but that's what it comes down to. Today I have with me via phone 2 of my friends, Mr. Mr. Ron Bishop, who served as the Commissioner of Corrections in the state of Kentucky, among a plethora, big word, of other positions in corrections, and Mr. George Baker, who served as the police chief at Kentucky State University and Georgetown College in Georgetown, Kentucky. Gentlemen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
George?
But let me straighten you up there a little bit, because
okay.
Police chief at Kentucky State University and director at Georgetown College.
Oh, well, that works. My first question, gentlemen, is simply, Ron, I'll let you start on this one. What was your initial impression of the situation in Memphis when you first saw the video of the arrest, if you will?
I had a couple of initial impressions. My first impression was trying to decide whether I actually wanted to see the video or not. I was reluctant. I know several people that I'm close to who are reluctant, who still may not have seen it. But my wife convinced me that I need to look at it, and I'm glad I did, only to be more convinced about what actually happened. Upon viewing that video, I kind of had a view in mind of what was going to occur just on past experiences. But I was absolutely shocked at the aggressiveness of those officers and the lack of seemingly discipline as they handled the situation, and how they treated Mr. Nichols right from the start. Those were my two initial impressions.
George, give me your initial impressions when you look at it.
Well, I had to watch it about 5 times to believe what I saw. And once I watched it, I sat around and thought about it for a while. My wife and I discussed it. But it was the worst case of brutality I've ever seen in my life. And I was just appalled by the situation. I'd never seen that kind of brutality in my 40 years of law enforcement.
As you describe the surprise or the angst that you felt watching the video, Ron, what was the foremost thought in your mind about the entire situation as you viewed it?
Well, like Chief Baker said, after I watched it the first time, I drew some initial impressions, but I did go back and watch it again because I started looking for different things based on what my experience has been over the years, trying to see different aspects or focusing on different things about it. And as I said, I'd never seen, as Chief said, I'd never seen such an aggressive attack on a person who apparently had not exhibited any kind of behavior that warranted that level of aggressive behavior. I am used to police officers approaching a vehicle carefully, very carefully, and asking the individual to keep their hands where they can see them and either exit their vehicle or not exit their vehicle. But I noticed how quickly they snatched the door open and pulled him from the vehicle and began to really assault him. And I remember hearing him say, "What did I do? What did I do? I haven't done anything." And they would give him orders, and he would say, "Okay, okay, okay." But they kept him to the point that he was able to escape from them. And I just thought, I've never seen anything like this. It's like, where did their training go? Where did their discipline go? Where did their ability to de-escalate rather than escalate a traffic stop?
George, what did you think after seeing it several times and trying to understand what created the need for all the violence this man absorbed?
Well, I have to think part of that, if not all of it, was personal. You don't strike a man as many times as they did if you're just trying to arrest him. They could have had him arrested in the first 7-8 minutes. I mean, these guys were stepping back and throwing blows like they were in a street fight. And it wasn't just one of them, although I think one of them had the biggest problem with him because he was throwing the most blows. But 2 of them could have had him arrested in a matter of minutes. I'm not understanding why it took 5. And I have to feel that whole thing was personal. In what way, I don't know. but that wasn't police work. That was gang work.
That has been a everything that I read and listen to is talking about the Scorpion unit being a gang rather than a disciplined police unit. Ron, you told me something the other day when I first contacted you about being on the show, that the dispatcher asked the police who was in the policeman that was in pursuit of the gentleman why they were stopping him, and they never got an answer.
Yeah, that was, again, after looking at it several times, I started listening and looking for different things. And I noticed that the dispatcher asked, what is the offense? What's the nature of this stop? And there was never a response from the officers. So the dispatcher was never told why they were stopping this individual. And again, to the point that this is supposed to be an elite, highly trained group of officers whose primary function, as I understand it, was to deal with gang activity, drug trafficking, and weapons, would be making a routine traffic stop. Most traffic stops are made by officers on patrol, not organized units like that with 5 people, and it just seemed highly irregular that 5 officers would be making a routine traffic stop when that's not their real function and not their highest priority.
That makes sense.
Go ahead, George.
I just said that makes sense. I said that makes sense.
And it makes sense because these guys were specifically trained, like Chief Bishop said, for violent criminals, drugs, weapons. And this man was driving down the street. Maybe he did do something reckless. Maybe he could have U-turned in the middle of the street. But I'm at a loss as to what, again, like we just said, why would you have 5 people making a traffic stop? If the man didn't do anything else, he was scared to death that they were going to kill him. But let's talk about an approach that makes sense. George, when in your training and training your officers when you're the chief of police, did they walk into a situation and then become the offender rather than the defender of the situation? Is that normal police activity?
No, it's not. From what I've seen, they went into it to brutalize this kid. I saw no police work there at all. So they had a reason for doing what they're doing. We'll never know what it was, but it was not police work. It had nothing to do with police work.
Ron, when you talk about police work, one of the things that bothers me, and the first time I noted it was when they were having real bad problems in San Francisco with the homeless, was that when the when the fire department shows up, people run to the fire engine to tell them what's going on and what needs to be done. When the police show up, everybody goes the other way. What's wrong with that?
Well, in my opinion, that comes down to the confidence or the viewed role of those particular organizations. Police have a motto of to protect and serve, and firefighters' jobs is to save property. But oftentimes they're viewed very differently in the community, and especially in communities of color. The firefighters seem to be less of a threat, a little bit more willing to deal with people, especially if you've got a very, very aggressive police department, or the culture of that community or the culture of that police department is such that the lack of confidence in the community causes them to rush to firefighters, who are oftentimes going to be on the scene to say, hey, we've been here as witnesses and we want you to know this is kind of what we've seen before you got here. And it comes down to the public's trust. Agencies like police, fire, corrections have to have the trust of the public. If it's lost, then pretty much everything is lost. And the unfortunate part of it is that one or two bad officers can destroy that credibility in just a matter of moments. And trust me, it takes years to rebuild if it can be rebuilt. But it's a long, arduous process to do that, and yet it can be lost so quickly by just a few bad apples.
So true.
George, when we look at what went on in Memphis, there seems to be an issue of culture, because they claim they trained these guys, but the training did not take, if you will. How do you explain the culture getting completely out of kilter with the training they received?
Well, training's there. The officer just chose to ignore the training and go off on his own.
Okay.
The training is well in most places. I can't speak for all places, but officers choose to go in another direction, and that's what makes it dangerous. And
I absolutely agree with the chief. When you have these elite, so-called elite units, and you give them these names that sound really ferocious,
Yes.
you have to be very, very careful about the leadership, the management, the goals, the follow-up, and the supervision. Because when you start talking about scorpions and vipers and dragons and zombies, and you give these units those names, they then feel empowered. One of the things that I remember about a portion of the video was the body cams were on. They're supposed to be on, but when you see that level of violence and body cams are on, does that mean we think we are so tough, so important, so elite that we are not even vulnerable to anything, even though these cameras are running? That we can just do what we want to do and have it recorded and it'll be okay. That was terrifying to me, was seeing this happening with body cams on. Did that mean we're untouchable? You know, we can do whatever we want. We don't even have to turn our cameras off, and we can handle a citizen in this manner.
Yeah, that came to mind last night. Those names that are supposed to empower them to be a working unit also empowers them to be like you said, untouchable, above the law. They're doing the work that they've been told, and they're doing it as we are independent of everybody else in the situation. So whenever you name a group, if you name them Bulldogs or Tigers or Broncos or Thoroughbreds, whatever you name them, that now becomes an identification. And sometimes the identification gets out of hand. George, when you were a chief and you did training for your officers, or you took your officers through training, how important was it that they realized that this was to protect the citizens of the city and not of the campus, basically, and not to become one of the problems? There seems to be a nature of the police department to become a large part of the problem rather than part of the solution.
I think it goes back to the heads of these departments. If we allow, well, how about our kids? We allow our kids to go out and do certain things, and there's no repercussions, or keep doing it.
So they come
And I
back.
think that it comes back to whether you choose you're going to lose your job, you're going to go to prison, or whatever. But if there's no repercussions, you're going to continue doing what you're doing. And in most police departments, there's that thought of repercussions. So you don't go outside the law. But I could never see myself or any of my officers at the time going that far. So we all look what we work for and what would be done if we did. And you work for the same place, don't you?
Yeah, we all work for the same thing. The part that bothers me is, I suppose, that when you work in an environment like being a policeman or a fireman, you are a representative of the community. You are not external to the community. You are part of the community. And it seems that
Sure.
most of these police departments or policemen that get into trouble feel like they are somehow beyond being a citizen. Ron, what do you ever feel that, or is that something that's notable?
Well, I think that being in police and corrections is very difficult work.
No doubt.
I know that there's a lot of public scrutiny. That's okay. There should be. There's a lot of dissatisfaction from time to time about what goes on with police departments and inside corrections and jails and prisons. But it's very, very important work. And it's oftentimes, especially in the field that I was in corrections, thankless work. And that was always a hard thing to get across to people, that you're never going to get rich because you're not going to get paid that kind of money. The public understands very little about what you do, and 99.9% of it in the prison and jail system is behind walls and is not seen. So then there's the opportunity for distortion and misinformation and all kinds of images to be put out there that may or may not be true. Police work is out in the public. People see what police officers do. They don't see what correction officers do. But it's very, very difficult work, and it's gotten a lot harder over the years. There's easy access to weapons,
Yes.
which puts police officers in a very, very vulnerable stage. I'm sure Chief Baker would agree. Domestic violence calls and traffic stops are two of the most potentially dangerous situations for an officer. So you have all of that to deal with. Then we've become a very litigious society. We want to sue about everything. And so oftentimes officers feel like, there's no road. How do I stay on the path? How do I do the right thing? Especially when you're placed in a situation where you make a life and death decision in what could be a millisecond. That's the tough part of it. And that's the part that I think is at least from my experience in working with police chiefs and their command staff and officers, what they have to constantly remind them of. And in recruiting, look for people who are able to handle those high stress situations and make those life and death decisions in just a fraction of a second, where their life is at stake or the lives of innocent citizens. And that to me is why I think it's so courageous for our officers who serve, oftentimes without the credit that they deserve, and yet how oftentimes we don't realize how really dangerous and difficult their jobs are.
One of the things you mentioned earlier, there are far more good cops than bad ones. I mean, there's
Yes.
no doubt in my mind. But that, and
sure.
and you also mentioned. Go ahead, George.
I was just agreeing with you. There are more good cops than bad. And the hardest thing for me in the past few days I had to do was explain to my granddaughter, who's 11 years old, that all cops are not bad. Her perception, because she's seeing her grandfather in uniform and go to work and stay forever and come back. But I have to explain to her that all cops are not bad.
But the actions of one or two bad ones, as Chief Bishop said earlier in the show, one or two bad apples sours the whole community on the entire staff. We had a situation here in Nashville where a young man was approached by the police outside his car, and the young man started running, and the policeman shot him in the back and killed him. And the question was, somebody said even John Wayne doesn't shoot people in the back. The perception of what is logical and moral and fair in this country has been so distorted in the last 20 years. I think it's a difficult walk for a police officer to feel as though he is being supported and feel as though he can find support in the community. Again, the culture that surrounds a particular police force is the driving factor in how it's perceived by the public. How do we improve the cultural makeup or the cultural perception of police forces so that situations like this are less likely to appear? Ron?
That's the $64,000 question. I asked myself that for the bulk of my career. Was it recruiting? Was it training? Was it vetting these officers? Was it supervision, management, pay or salaries, benefits? And maybe it's all of those things, I don't know, but that was always the tough thing for me, was trying to get the right kind of person, get them off to a good start, make sure they're doing their job the right way, and if they aren't, get rid of them. You got to get them out of the system. A lot of and I'm certainly not anti-union, but a lot of our organizations have very, very strong unions and very, very strict contracts. But you cannot allow individuals that get into your system, I don't care whether they're rookie officers in corrections and police or whether they're veterans, you have to get those bad apples out. And that comes down to supervision and oversight and evaluation and analysis of their performance. That's tough to do. That's always, for me, as I said, the $64,000 question, because you find that once they get in the organization and they get a little seniority, they get a little rank, then they start to influence those younger officers. I've heard this a million times, and I imagine Chief Baker probably has heard this too. A senior officer say, "Look, I know what they told you in the academy, and I know what your FTO, your field training officer, told you, but this is how we're going to do it." That, to me, is you're getting that person off to a bad start. And when you have paramilitary organizations like police and corrections, where you have rank and you have stripes and you have bars and you have stars, like the military, that oversight, that influence is tremendous. And so those senior officers, those line supervisors, have to be on their toes, and you have to address those issues at whatever level you find them. Rookie officers on probation, senior officers who kind of gotten off the track, or line supervisors who are just not doing their job anymore.
George?
And if you're paying attention, you can spot some of those same people during the first 90 days.
Yes.
And if you can get rid of them, you should. Because sometimes it's not easy. It's not hard to spot. And if your line supervisors are doing their job and stepping up and speaking out when they're supposed to, we can get some of those people out early. And can get some of the older guys who are causing problems. And you're right. You said sometimes that older officer can be the department's worst enemy.
Absolutely.
And that therein lies the rub. You've got some guy who's been in the department for 20 years, and he is someone that youngsters who come into the department may look up to because of his seniority, and they may listen to him and find themselves in a situation where they're responding not how they're trained, but how this person has told them they should respond. And when you find those people, if you can't fire them, you can absolutely take them off the street, can't you? I'm asking.
In some situations. And the smaller departments, you have a better chance of doing that as opposed to the bigger departments.
Okay. What makes
In a
that the
small
case?
department
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
In a small department like mine, over the years, I could pretty much pick out those troubled officers and eventually get rid of them, or definitely keep them away from the younger officers. Now, in the larger departments, that could be more of a problem.
Well, a college campus presents some really significant challenges as it relates to the relationship between authority figures and young adults. So yours was not an easy task at all. Ron, when you think of the other instances of, we say, police brutality, and George Floyd, gentleman in New York City, another fellow named Diallo, the gentleman that was shot in his own home eating ice cream because the lady walked into his apartment and thought it was hers. How do the police live this stuff down? The problem is, every time something happens like this thing in Memphis, all of that comes back to the surface immediately. There's no hesitancy to bring that back up and to use that as a weapon to beat the police over the head with. how do we somehow get the perception of police officers to a point that people don't immediately associate with them with some drastic something that happened. Of course, it happens so often. It's not it's not a long distance between time. How do we clean up the image of the police force?
Well, again, a very difficult issue. And I think it comes down to the culture of the organization. And as the chief mentioned, the larger the organization, the tougher it is. I mean, I can only imagine what it would be like to be police commissioner in New York, where you have about 30,000 officers. That's almost unimaginable in my mind. So what you have to have is a culture that is known throughout the organization, and the rank and file, the command staff, middle management, line supervisors, all pulling in the same direction, and all recognizing that those unacceptable actions won't be tolerated. But building the culture of an organization takes a long time. And the last statistic that I read, police chiefs' tenures are fairly short because they're high pressure jobs. They're under a lot of scrutiny. You're not going to be the most popular person around when things happen, and a lot of those positions have turnover, and they're either political or they're just a change that's made either because of burnout or whatever. But police chiefs' tenures aren't lifetime appointments, and if you have in that transition changes in the culture that aren't positive, or a person who comes in who's not willing to try to work to keep that culture where it is, if you've got a good culture, then things start to slip and start to move and start to get out of hand. But I firmly believe that the culture of the organization, if you can maintain that, if you can build that culture, that's our best bet. That's our best bet, and that requires sometimes stability and some at the head in the leadership, and that's what sometimes we don't have.
Yeah, well, that is a definite right there. When you look at any organization, every time you change the guy at the top, everything changes from top to bottom. Personnel changes, methodology changes. Attitudes toward
changes.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
I said attitude changes as well.
Yeah, and with those changes, those people who were operating on the wavelength of the previous administration now find themselves put off because, well, we were doing this just fine. Why did they change to this? So you're constantly in a state of flux. So I hear you loud and clear. The stability of the department is relies quite a bit on the stability of the leadership. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy said there are no laws that could be passed that would help this situation at all. Do you agree with that, George?
No. I heard him say that as well. I don't agree with that because there's always room for improvement.
Say that again, please.
I didn't agree with that statement at all. I said there is always room to improve or change. And I heard that statement as well. And I did not agree with it.
Ron?
You know, one of the things that was considered by Congress was the Police Reform Act, and that went nowhere. Or the George Floyd Act, and that went nowhere. There were some things in there that I think long term could have some positive parts of it. There were some things that I didn't even agree with, and I think the qualified immunity, that's really important. That if you do away with that, you're going to have people who are not going to become police officers. It's just you're too vulnerable to scurrilous kind of allegations, to lawsuits where you have to defend yourself. That was part of it. I thought was dangerous for recruiting and retention of any police department, regardless of the size. If the government won't stand behind an officer who has not done anything wrong, then everybody's on their own, and that's pretty dangerous. But I think there have been some things that like outlawing chokeholds. I think there's some progress has been made, but again, the whole issue of police reform kind of got politicized and became defund the police. Well, nobody was, there were protesters out there talking about defund the police, but that was never going anywhere. We would become like old Dodge City. It would just be you'd be afraid to come out of your house if we defunded the police. That's ridiculous. Right. But you can always reform things. You can improve them, and not take away police officers' powers, but require police and correction officers, but require certain things of them as far as training and leadership and management that can help to bring a little of that positive change and rebuild a little of that trust in the community.
You think we'll ever see that?
Well,
you ever think we'll ever see that in our towns?
That remains to be seen. I've heard some people who had some significant ideas about community policing and all of that good stuff, but I won't claim to know enough about it to take a position. The thing that and we'll finish on this one. The thing that seems to be a problem is what I read in the paper is called hotspotting, where they find areas of a city where there's significant crime, very significant crime, and they put a unit in there to quell the crime. But the problem is they just arrest people, and whether they are suspected of anything other than driving down the street too fast, like we talked about before, why would the Scorpion unit be stopping a guy for a moving violation? That's where, to me, we have a problem. That the over policing of people because of the color of their skins. But I think if we're going to have these units that are assigned to do something, make sure that they're professional units and not gangs. Ryan, what do you think of that?
I agree, and I heard in watching the news, one of the retired police officers who was on one of the news shows used that very phrase. He said those weren't police officers, that was a gang. And I hadn't thought about it like that, but it's like, yep, I think that's right. I think that was a pretty good analogy of it.
Yeah, that was not my thought initially when I watched the video, but I to this day, even with this discussion, I'm still at a loss for any level of justification for what happened with this young man. George, what do you think about the special units? Is that something that has outlived its usefulness, or is that something that has to be handled better than what they're doing?
think it has to be handled better than what they're doing. There is a need for those kind of units in certain towns, but they have to be supervised better.
Well, when you set up a special unit, it has to stay within the context of what the overall goals and objectives of the police department are. I know that these are hard times, and our legislators are allowing anybody to buy a gun anytime they want to after they're 18 years old. So a police officer, when he makes a traffic stop, has to be intimidated simply to have to walk up to a car and ask for a guy's license and registration. That is especially if it's out somewhere away from the city. They talk about the people that are being stopped rolling into a lighted place. I think if I was a cop, I'd force people to roll into a lighted space so we could all be seen. So, but if you have one last thing to say to the people who are listening, George, tell me what that would be. George, you disappeared.
Be smart about what you do. And if you're being stopped by a police officer, obey the commands as best you can and protect yourself.
Okay. Ron, same situation with you. What is it that we as individual citizens can do to find our way into not being quite so afraid to when a police officer turns his lights on us?
Well, I agree with the chief. Obey the commands. Protect yourself. Keep your hands where you can see them. Don't start reaching around for things in a traffic stop. Police have a lot of authority, and they have life and death control over you. So don't challenge them on a routine stop or when you're questioned. It might be frustrating, it might be offensive, but when you consider what the potential outcome could be, then just be smart, as the chief said, and follow the commands, follow the instructions, protect yourself. And to your question, one last thing that I would like to say is I want to send kudos out to the Nichols family for the grace and dignity that they showed and how they comported themselves and helped keep Memphis from being set ablaze.
Amen, because that's exactly where it was going.
I think so. And the family had a lot to do with that. The chief of police, I think, had a lot to do with that. And I think given the nature of the offense and the tragedy of the whole event, it was handled about as well as it could be. But my respect goes out to the Nichols family for making sure that if you protest, do it peacefully.
I would ditto that in the mind that had they not done so, the west end of the state of Tennessee would be ablaze right now. That was obvious in how people responded immediately upon hearing it. It was a deadly situation. Thank both of you gentlemen for being with me today. Really enjoyed talking to you. We will talk more. I am in touch with my roommate, classmate, teammate, Mr. Bishop, quite often. And
Absolutely.
Brother Baker and I communicate. Let's stay in touch about this Memphis situation as we see it evolve. Thank you very much for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got 8 minutes to give you some information. First of all, king, dictator, emperor of the state of Tennessee, King Bill, has decided that the AIDS epidemic is over. So he is withholding funds from those organizations that provided condoms and clean needles and other necessary things to keep down the spread of AIDS. So he decides now, in his great wisdom as a epidemiologist, as the governor of the state of Tennessee, who has no idea how to handle an epidemic, that the epidemic is over. Do you remember someone else who said, it's just a flu, it will magically disappear, it will miraculously pass us by? I want you to know, when you look back on this 5 years from today, you'll know exactly who started the AIDS epidemic all over in the state of Tennessee. Make sure you put his name right above it. In Florida, the dictator of Florida, or North Cuba, has now decided that we're not going to teach black history like you want it taught, like it is the truthful part of it as part of history in general. The aspiration of Governor DeSantis, and I know it's DeSantis, Governor DeSantis is not obvious to me, but that it seems to be quite obvious to everybody else. Why would you not want history taught so that the truth of the matter is put out there? Governor DeSantis was a history major in college, I read today, which shocks me no end, since he fights so hard to keep the history of black folk or world history out of the history books. He has decided that anything that refers to people of the LGBTQ community should not be discussed. You shouldn't have Black Lives Matter mentioned. He has specific things, and all of them have to do with black folks and the culture. Does he have a dislike for people of color when he is in a state that is overwhelmed by people of color? Does that not make you wonder if this man is nuts? And he's going to run for president. Oh, I see what that is. He wants to be like the last Republican president we had. Okay. He wants to be Fidel North. It's strange that Mr. DeSantis, being of Hispanic roots, treats Hispanic people so offhandedly as to put them on a bus and send them to another city blindly and without support. I think that's criminal. That is totally criminal. Criminal. I didn't say it was bad socially. It's criminal. So, as I usually close, I close with a quote from the late Reverend Dr. Dale P. Andrews, former dean of the School of Homiletics in the Vanderbilt Divinity School. I have more problems than solutions, more questions than answers. Of these, I freely share. But I will call your attention to Reverend Joanne Robertson, who says, don't lose your faith. because things you don't understand and find idiotic keep happening. A study shows that this country's faith, this country's attendance at church mirrors all of the pain and suffering of COVID-19. Church attendance, of course, is way down simply because people are still afraid to get into groups. If you've gotten out of touch with your spiritual life, get back in touch. Get up on Sunday morning, put on your jeans and your sneakers, and go to church. Don't dress up. Go as you are. Go as you are. Just go. And find that spiritual spark that you had years ago. Go back to where you discovered who you were. Well, we appreciate you watching. Hope we heard something that makes sense. And hope you will watch Let's Talk About It next Thursday. This has been Let's Talk About It. And I am your host, William Head. Good evening.